Welcome, welcome. This is Greg Lewis, the city manager here in Lebanon, New Hampshire. Welcome you to Lebanon Depth. This is a beautiful day in Lebanon. It was a little cold here for a while, but now the sun is out, and this afternoon I was back into short sleeves. I still am refraining from going to my winter parka. So I hope this is really cool. Today, you know, the thing that makes the city go round, there are so many things, but one of the big cogs, one of the big wheels in the whole process is assessing. And sometimes it's really hard to get your handle on assessing as to its meaning. And so that's why I'm really pleased to have returned the topic of assessing. And I have with me today two guests, Jay Hutchins, who is the chair of our Board of Assessing, and then I have our city assessor, and Dave McMullen. So I want to start at the beginning of the show, and I'll end at the end by asking some of you, I know there are people that are watching, I really appreciate your engagement to watch these shows. And so there may be somebody out there that's watching or that you know that might be interested in coming on the Board of Assessing. So we are really looking to have a pool of citizens to kind of join the cause and be part of our city. And one of the important places would be to become part of our candidate pool for Board of Assessing. So that being said, I'll return to that subject at the end of the show, and we'll give you a few tips how you might get engaged and explore it. And so that's an important thing. Keep in mind, and we'll talk a little more at the end. Jay, welcome again.
Well, thank you very much, Greg.
I told you ahead of time, and I always tell people we'd like to learn a little bit because it's kind of fascinating for me as how persons that are citizens here in the community get involved with the city. I mean, this is a volunteer type of arrangement. How did you get involved, and how did you get to be chair?
Well,
and now David's already saying he hogtied you into being chair. Yeah, he's being frivolous, so we won't.
No, there was a lasso involved. But no, actually, it was quite a long time ago that I first got involved with the zoning board.
Oh, good.
And spent about 7 years on the zoning board. And I got invited onto the zoning board by some friend that I knew that was sitting on the zoning board. And I think that that's typically how it happens. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, because I think that there are a lot of people out there that would like to participate in local government, but they just don't know how to do that. Nobody comes.
How do you get in there?
Knocks on their door, and so that's how it happened for me. And I spent about 7 years on the zoning board, and found somebody that kind of wanted to get on the zoning board.
That's great.
So I said, okay, well, there was no openings.
Yes.
And I was chairing it at the time, and I said, well, I'll step off, and you can step on, because I think it's a really good thing to have rotation, and get people involved. That my vacation didn't last very long. I didn't get out the door before I got lassoed by somebody over at the assessing office and wanted me to become involved in that. But that's been very interesting. It's been a very interesting experience. It goes all the way back to before, before we began taxing the hospital, DHMC. And I was fortunate enough to be chosen as the lead negotiator for the city, along with the city manager, and because I was on the Board of Assessors. And so I participated in that process of negotiating with DHMC, and that was an extraordinarily educational opportunity. And I think that points to one of the benefits of participating in local government. I think that we all have an obligation, if we have the ability and we have the time, and not everybody does. And so those of us who do have the time and do feel that we have some ability, I think we really need to step up to the plate. But aside from that, you learn an awful lot. You get to meet some very interesting people. When I was on the zoning board, I met a lot of, the developers, people that were, I wouldn't have bumped into those folks otherwise.
And they're so full of energy and ideas and innovation, and they take on these projects that are so so complicated sometimes and complex, or sometimes they're more simple, but they're challenging for them. And anybody that's able to do that, I find their personalities to be, kind of these outstanding type personalities. So that would be, you're right, that would be really quite an experience to meet these developers and what how they're portraying and where they want to go and all that sort of thing as to what's best for the community. And that thing about getting involved in the Dartmouth Hitchcock, that is such an important thing for our community, Dartmouth Hitchcock Medical Center. It is so impactful. It's I've never been lived in a place. I've lived in a lot of places, but I've never been in one where there's been quite that much impact by a particular institution or a particular entity. But that's certainly something.
Yeah, it's been amazing since they moved to Lebanon from Hanover. And of course, have grown and grown and grown.
And they have they have magnificent plans that they don't seem to be stopping. They continue. They continue. Dave, now why don't you set a backdrop for us by talking about the seasons? I call it the seasons. That's kind of romantic. Assessing is romantic, right? The seasons of assessing. I know it's cyclical, but I always kind of forget.
Yeah, it's very cyclical. I mean, this time of year we're in the fall season now, so actually it's relatively quiet for us, which is kind of nice. It gives us a little bit of a breather. We've sent all our values into the state, so the state can set our tax rate for us once they get the rest of the components that are necessary to do that. So our hands are kind of limited as to what we can do since those values have already been locked into place. So we have a little bit of quiet time right now. So this time of year we kind of tend to look at some housekeeping items or make our plans for the upcoming season to see what projects we need to undertake or look at, what things I may need to bring to Jay and the board as to areas of adjustment. Rick and the staff and I will look at values on a daily basis. And so if we spot a trend where a neighborhood or a class of property is not in line with the rest of the city, then we need to adjust that, and we can bring it back to the board and Jay and say, look, we need you to just take a look and A-OK these changes. And that's happened, I think, a couple of times, at least since we did our last update in 2010. So we may have some more things coming up. And then we'll get into the tax billing season, well, I'll call it tax bill season, when those come out. And that's when the appeal period opens up for anybody that's looking to, feels that their assessment is incorrect and would like to contest it with the city. And so that will begin from the day the tax bill is issued until March the 1st of the following year. So it'll be March the 1st of 2014. And so we'll get a number of those in, and then we'll go through the investigative aspects of those and make recommendations again back to the board so that they can review those and yay or nay those recommendations that we put forward. Once we get, and at the same time there's an overlap in that appeal process, because also in the spring we start our pickups or our new construction or renovations, anything that's incomplete. We'll go back out and pick up the new garages, the decks, the new dwellings, the demolitions. If somebody's demolished something, we need to know that too, because we want to take it off their property value, not just adding. It's a two-way street. We do take things off. So we will take care of all those. And we'll work on those right up through the summer, till the end of the summer, pretty much till, say, early to mid-August. We'll be working on those types of issues. The big items we'll try and pick up earlier in the spring so that we can make sure that they get on the June bill. We'd hate to miss that and all of a sudden have our property owner get an enormous property tax bill all in December. But that's too hard to budget. So when we have large dollar items, we try and get them early in the year, and then the smaller items, the sheds and the decks and the little modifications and alterations, we'll pick up through the summer and add them in, so that by this time of year, we've insulated or encapsulated all our values for the state, again, to do the tax rate setting.
That's great. Now one of the things I value about the assessing department and the subject is the I think to have citizen volunteer step up and work on boards with a professional who is hired by the city to carry out their professional responsibilities, that the combination of those two aspects, putting them together and having a close and professional relationship with respect for each other's roles, makes for good government and makes for good communities. And you all have, from my outside vantage point, a really good relationship in working between the board and the city assessor. So that kind of, maybe get in and describe that work of the board and how it relates with one another, and just give people an example, kind of a slice of what the board, how the board conducts itself in its meetings, and what kind of subjects do the board take up, and what do you see as a board?
Well, typically what will happen is someone will disagree with the assessing office in terms of the valuation that's been set. That's probably the best example and the most common. And so they will bring their grievance to the board, and what we get to see as a board is we get to see what the assessor's office has come up with in terms of fact and opinion, and we listen to what the property owner feels is the situation from their perspective, and then we try to use common sense and look for an equitable solution. You know, that's, I think a lot of people I think lose track of the idea that what the board is tasked to do is not to be the professional assessor, and we've got a great staff to do that. We don't have to be professional assessors, and that's nice because we bring a different perspective, and that's why people from all walks of the city, you know, could be involved, because they don't have to be assessors. But we kind of come from the property owner's perspective and say, well, gee, either we agree with the assessor or we agree with the property owner in terms of equitability, and it makes sure everybody in the city is being treated the same. Not everybody likes the way that the assessing process goes about setting values. And you can argue about that, but as long as everybody's value is being set using the same methodology, then we have, you know, everybody is being treated equally and fairly. And so sometimes, you know, just personal opinion. I can remember the situation down on 12A where some of the properties that were kind of set back away from 12A were being lumped in with the ones that are close to 12A, and they didn't have the visual, you know, you couldn't see them so well. And we, you know, the board looked at it and said, well, gee whiz, we agree with the property owner. And not only was that property owner's taxes reduced, but all of their neighbors, you know, in that group. Even though the others didn't come forward, we, you know, that's what we did. And, you know, it was just a matter of right or wrong. It was a matter of a group of other property owners, the board being just other members of the community, looking and trying to see what was equitable. And we just disagreed with the assessing office on that. And the part about our getting along really well is that the assessing office doesn't really have any kind of a bone to chew in it. They do their job, they do the best they can, and they recognize that if we come in and we just kind of have a different opinion, that's fine with them. They're happy and work with us very well on that.
That's good. Everyone understands your roles.
Yeah.
Because that's the respectful thing of roles. Because I find that in providing community governance, you know, the whole community needs to get engaged in different roles. And if everyone gets engaged, probably the outcomes are going to be, I think, very successful for all, because there's the parity, and there's the equity, and there's the fairness, and people can live with that. What people can't live with is the opposite of those things, where they don't have parity, and that there is a disparate treatment, or that there's a lack of understanding, or there's some sort of overreaching by one role over another role. And that balance is a nice balance, produces good results. And I think that's a really neat thing about your board, and the neat thing about the assessing professionals we have about working that way. And that is a great example of showing how that reached.
But even from staff's perspective, working with the board, I mean, thank you for saying that we're highly professional, appreciate it. But the board is equally professional and understands their role. My current board members all understand their role extremely well. And so when I go in or with a recommendation or something that I need to have them act upon, there's no, I want to say that the attitudes are all left at the door on both sides. We take our personal hat off, we put our business hats on, or he puts his board hat on, I put my, and we're just there to discuss the issue at the table and come to, as Jay mentioned, an equitable resolution that is going to satisfy the needs of the city to maintain equity of value, but then also addresses the property owner's concern about fairness of the tax. So they're looking at just the tax bill. I'm looking at equity of value. Tax is a consequence of the value. But so I'm looking at equity of value where they're looking at equity of their tax bill. And so my board members are outstanding in that way, and being able to look at the situation. Sometimes it's heated. We get occasionally
it happens. It does happen.
A heated property owner, and it's understandable because it's very personal, and we're affecting that individual's finances. And so you know, they're really good about seeing to the core of the issue, and dealing with it with the delicateness that needs to be dealt with, so not to be offensive to anybody in the room, but yet in the end, I shouldn't say in every circumstance everybody walks out of the room happy.
No, not always.
But for the most part, I mean, the decisions that the board is making are on point, and most residents are satisfied with their results.
Yeah, and you know, because one of the things about working with people and working groups, you know, and how people get tired of hearing this, but I say it a lot because it's been something handed down to me by others, and I think it's very appropriate that when we are in a group setting, the things that are on the table we should be able to be analytical about. We should be able to be fact-based. We should be able to apply corollaries and theorems to it. But we should, well, that is kind of a hard science or engineer or a hard, hard mathematical sometimes. But we should be soft around the table, soft around the table. We should have, we should participate in a way of relationships so that we have relationships around the table. Now, that doesn't mean everyone leaves happy, but I would think that for me, it's if I practice that, what I said and then what I preach, then if they're leaving upset, it's probably an internalized thing for them, how they're handling what's coming their way. It is not of our doing, because we maintained our responsibilities of being analytical and factual and applying correct principles, but we were respectful. We listened. We have good. The listening skills of the board are very strong.
It's key.
That's key, and then listening leads to the understanding, and understanding leads to respect. So that which is afforded might not be accepted, but that's more an internal thing by people. And that's just kind of the way I've evolved into how to think about this, because so some people leave saying, I'll live with it, I don't like it, maybe I even hate it, but I'll live with it because of the way that was handled. Right. Some people will always say, you know, I just completely abhor that. But that is how they're handling what they're experiencing, and not how I handled what we're doing, not how the board handled, or how our assessing staff or any other professional staff handled. That's what our goal should be, and I think you guys are doing well in that category.
Well, I think we do view it as being very important to give each individual an opportunity to have their day in court, you know, to have their say. And and we listen very carefully. We give them all the time they need to state their case. And I think that that goes a long ways towards making people feel good about the process. Even though the outcome may not be what they wanted, they're happy with the process and feel like they've had their say.
Yeah, and they have appellate rights.
Oh, absolutely.
Oh,
yeah.
And to talk a little bit about the appellate rights and talk a little bit about how, how many appeals we have. That sort
Occasionally, somebody will still disagree with us. We do get those far and few between cases where they don't agree with the board's actions or decisions, and that's okay. So they can appeal it to a higher body, to the state. The deadline for the application for the appeal to the city is March the 1st. The city's deadline to act upon it is July the 1st. So it gives us, what, April, May, June to analyze them and come back to the board with a recommendation, and the board to sit with the two parties and make a ruling. And then if the property owner is still dissatisfied with the city's results, they have until September the 1st to appeal it to the state. Now, at the state level, there are two venues that the property owner can take. One is to the Superior Court in Grafton County, and the other is to the Board of Tax and Land Appeals in Concord. Probably 97% of all the appeals, that when we do get them, end up at the Board of Tax and Land Appeals in Concord. One, it's the filing fee is and the cost is significantly less to the property owner anyway. It's a $65, I believe, is the current filing fee. And you don't need to have an attorney present at a board hearing. I look at it, it's the state equivalent of the City Board of Assessors. Mm-hmm. You have a 3-person tribunal. They're quasi-judicial. But they handle, I mean, hundreds and hundreds of property tax appeals annually. In addition to all kinds of other appeals, they hear eminent domain and business enterprise tax cases and a bunch of other type of appeals that some of them are only in their jurisdiction. No other body in the state can hear those cases except for them. But the property tax, you have those two venues. And so they'll render an opinion on the actions that the city took and come up with, either they'll support us or they'll come up with an alternative value, like anything, based on the evidence and the facts that are presented at that hearing. The downside, if there is one, in going to the Board of Tax and Land Appeals venue is typically the wait. Because it's the preferred venue for so many appeals across the state, if somebody was to file of this year, which would be for your 2012 taxes, if anybody filed this year, I probably won't have a hearing before the board for a minimum of 2 years, sometimes 3, because of their backlog. Mm-hmm. Versus if you went to the Grafton County Superior Court, you'd probably get a hearing that much sooner, but then you're going to have the cost of the court fees plus attorney's fees, because you need it's, I don't know if you could do it, I suppose you could do it pro se at Grafton County.
You can still do but the rules of the court are complicated and hard.
Very complicated and very strict. The rules at the board are complicated. There's no getting around it. They're complicated. They're not as strict in the sense that the board will give the appealing party a listening ear, and they can provide them some guidance in a limited capacity at the hearing to make sure that, so they don't lose any of their rights, so that they can just maintain their property rights through the appeal process.
Keep their due process.
Exactly.
And I know that in the context of that, there's sometimes consideration of settlement as these matters go on, as things become, sometimes maybe things are clarified or cleared up or portrayed in a different way, and you work with the board in evaluating these settlement possibilities. So the board's also involved in appeal work in terms of after it's gone there, and when of settlement talks, you'll end up, Dave will bring you, right, is that the way it works?
Yeah.
Is that?
Yeah.
I mean, I might be the person that's acting in good faith to try and come up with a reasonable settlement value, but I don't have any authority to act or anything, so I have to come back to my board and my chair and say, okay, look, ABC or XYZ entity has come and offered this. I think it's a good proposition to the city. Here's my reasons why, or I don't. Here's my reasons why, and I need to get the
buy-in
and the blessing and the sign-off of my board before any activity or any finalization can take place. It's a check and balance still. As to
another example of the roles of the board and the roles of the staff, so that the citizens, as you described, Jay, that become the representatives, fellow citizens, are making some determinations on how much, I mean, where should we go on such matters? Because there's public cost to it, and there's impact on the individuals, I mean, our fellow community members. So we're concerned about those sort of things.
Oh, sure. Cost is a big factor.
I'd be remiss without going to the other end of the spectrum. So you have, so you could see you have, you have your own fellow citizens deliberating on the board.
Right.
You have appellate processes that have been described, and we have a fellow citizens determine when settlements can reach. And then before it even gets to the board, there's this chance of early engagement with citizens and the assessing office as to valuation of their property.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, we look at that all the time. I mean, if somebody's appealed, whether it's locally or to the state level, I mean, we'll always, we never close a window or a door to a dialogue. If somebody comes forward and says, I have new information, or could we sit down and just talk about this to see if we can come to a resolution, I'm like, sure, why not?
Right.
It makes common sense. It saves the city time, resources, and the property owner time and resources, and that could be a win-win.
I often say to people, I say if you have something that you think you want the city to consider, early consideration is better than later consideration. Because early, before you spend money, before lines are drawn, try to have conversation. And we, in turn, it's a two-way street. We should try to engage. For the last couple of minutes, I wanted to cover two things. I wanted to come back and revisit our first topic about how to join the board. And then I'd like a brief comment on the role of assessing vis-a-vis the budget-making process. First of all, talking about how do you get on the board again, I think we're having the first annual Citizen Academy tonight.
Oh.
And it's City Manager 101 is the title of the first class. So I'm pleased we have 26 citizens who step forward to join the Citizen Academy this year. There'll be 6 classes, and we will be covering how we get on boards and assessing. What are tips from your points of view as to how you should approach if you were going to consider getting on the Board of Assessing? Jay, from your perspective?
Oh, I think the first thing to do would be to just attend a board meeting. And oftentimes they're very short. They don't, it's not, sometimes they go for
Well, yeah.
but oftentimes they're a half an hour or 45 minutes, and so that's not an awful lot of time to take. And that's an opportunity not only to see how the board operates, but it's also an opportunity to get to talk with the board members, because we are always eager to visit with new folks and talk about what's involved in being a member. And I think that would be the first step for anybody to take.
Well, that's a good tip. And they could talk to you too as well, then?
Absolutely, yeah. You can come by the office.
Get a little clarification on what the subject is.
Yeah, I can kind of give them a Reader's Digest version of the what fors and the duties.
Yeah. And you can get your application in the city clerk's office, that wonderful Sandy Allard and her wonderful staff. They'll get you an application. And if somehow you get lost in the mix there, contact city manager's office and we'll put you right in the queue.
Yeah, I'll point you in the right direction.
We'll make sure you're taken care of. In our last minute, try to summarize in 30 seconds what the role of assessing and budgeting. I am completing the internal workings in the city manager's proposal for the 2014 budget. And we engage you in the conversation with our key leader, our finance director, Lynn Jarvie, in weighing things. And what kind of engagement do you have with Lynn on assessing in terms of valuation and what we're facing?
Well, Lynn and I talk frequently. I mean, because the values that we set affects everything else that we do and what we can, the funds that we can generate and the projects that we can undertake. So typically, Lynn will look to me when I send in my values for the tax rate setting, the growth, the change in overall assessment in the city. Is it up or down from the previous year? So we can look at the growth. And that can help us to keep tax rates down because we have more value that is because of new construction. The city's grown that way, so that helps keep, as budgets grow, it helps keep that tax rate down so that people don't get sticker shock. So Len and I talk routinely.
Keep spreading. Try to spread the burden so we have sharing. So we can try to keep it from being untoward any individual property tax owner. We got to be good stewards. And I think I'll close by saying, you know, we have good stewards in the Board of Adjustment, and the Board of Assessing, and also Board of Adjustment, but Board of Assessing, and we have good judgment with our staff. But I want to thank the Board of Adjustment, and Jay, I want to thank you and your fellow members for serving on this. And if you have an interest in joining, please explore it. You know, I think Jay certainly illustrates how you can come to this task and you can find your way. One board, the next board, you might, the Board of Adjustment. Maybe you want to go to the Board of Adjustment. We really want to encourage citizens to be involved. We'll try to do better by you and being involved with you. So I hope you all have a good day and a beautiful fall. I think we're going to have a great one here in Lebanon. Thanks.